yet. Is that gonna work? Sometimes I wonder, like, what kind of software mind games are is like OBS playing with me, or is it Restream? Is it is it YouTube? Why do I always have? Is it too much to ask that software doesn't constantly ask me to sign in?
It's working.
Haha, success.
Yeah, I don't know what you did, but now it's working.
I selected my Chrome instance that was running Restream, and I hit F5.
Yeah, sometimes it is just
Sometimes I hate computers.
refreshing. Yeah.
I mean, I love these things that they're like, you know, set the mind free levels of technology, but at the same time, it is mind blowing to me that here we are, like, decades into computing and computer science, and the human user interface is pretty much sorted out at this point, and they can't. These damn things can't remember who's signed in. It just doesn't make any sense. So I have some software where I sign in one time, and the only time I ever have to sign in again is if I install it on a different machine.
Right. It's like some shit works and some shit, it's like when you click remember me on this machine, it's like that button does not do anything whatsoever and it never ever remembers. And it's so sporadic what software actually remembers the logins, but I feel like we also hit at some point there's like an account bloat, and I think the impetus or the like feeling of having too many accounts when somebody was like trying to sign you up for a new one push people to start using Google or Facebook or LinkedIn or
Oh, I
whatever
bet it's something
for
really.
everything.
I bet it's something really simple, like as you're describing, like they can only really handle so many accounts in memory, and as soon as they hit the threshold, the next request just wipes out the whole table, and they start over again. But if you have too many requests happening simultaneously, then no requests are actually being made because everything's just being wiped out because there aren't enough requests simultaneously to wipe out the table almost every time. So it wouldn't even matter. I'm sure that's like not the way it's happening, but in my mind, that's the way it's happening. It's like a frisbee that's filling up with drops of water, and it tips over at some point.
Well, and it wouldn't be as frustrating if all of the data that they collected that they sold, then I would like get a share of it or whatever. And it's like I I don't think Americans it would take a lot to convince them that their data is actually worth something, even though it's all constantly being sold, whether it's like the grocery fucking proc like the location in the store or where you stand the most in the grocery store or um what part of the screen you click on most frequently, and
Yeah.
it's like all of our habits are valuable to someone that's then going to turn around and try to use our habits against us to try to sell us some shit we don't need, and in the process it's like what's what's the actual long-term benefit, because at
Well,
some point there that person's not going to have anything to like any more buying power, so you can't continue to exploit the consumer indefinitely and infinitely. There's without moderation, it's like capitalism in pursuit of trying to exploit every part of the consumer angle and not actually do ad revenue sharing with the consumer has like set itself up to no longer have consumers. And it's like you can have all of the data on what the consumer is like looking at or browsing, but if they don't have any money to purchase, that cycle is going to eventually end. And I feel like the entropy has caught up with that cycle, and there's like I said, the habits of people who are browsing but not buying are worthless. It's like marketing has taken over commerce and capitalism for that matter. It feels like capitalism is just marketing anymore. And it's like they'll just take some shit that doesn't work and just market the fuck out of it. And if people buy it, then they just hope people don't actually try to use the thing or hope it doesn't explode enough that they get a class action lawsuit and then have to pay back all of the fucking profit, air quote profit, when it's really just stolen money, basically. Like,
And you just made me think of like there's a way to describe this with essentially three metrics. It's there's three scales. There's a scale of doesn't know how to knows how to do something about things, knows what to do, and doesn't know what to do. And then there's the scale of would if they could or will, and then won't, and they just wouldn't anyway. And I think the dilemma here is that there are a lot of people who don't know how, they don't know what, and they wouldn't anyways. They just like having access to, you know, dancing pixels at high refresh rates, extra bloom, fake lens flare, strobe, 10 billion colors.
yeah, because then you see like people get 8K TVs just to watch fucking Joe Rogan.
Oh man, that's not.
Like, you would think that with all these
Well,
screens
you know,
that
there are
people
no
would have
actual
a lot
video games to
more.
play in 8K though. That's the problem.
Oh, for sure. There's not a lot of content.
There's
But even
and most
on
of the content is like some IMAX film, some huge format motion picture that was transferred into a digital format. It's like not even.
so that exact thing is why 3D movies failed miserably.
Oh yeah.
They just didn't make enough actual movies that were 3D at the base, and it was just trying to upscale regular movies and add little 3D spots. And it wasn't good enough to get people interested in the technology.
I don't
And the
think that
same
I don't think anyone, any director, cinematographer, there were just no visionaries at that moment in technology who could see what to do with it and how to use three-dimensional projection, the whole out of phase projection system to a higher degree of impact. Nobody could figure out how to do it. It was all like, let's swing a barrel over the audience, or let's throw some fire into the audience, or make explosions move into the audience. And then, of course, there's the really wild shit that happened with 3D porn, but that's basically the same stuff, but just with dicks and titties. And so, I mean, that's kind of like guns and explosions, I guess. But there wasn't anything worth it. Like I don't think I ever saw any movie in a theater that was enhanced by 3D effect. And the only I know that I watched a movie on a 3D television one time with special glasses, but halfway through, one of the pairs of glasses battery wore out, and so we had to stop watching it because one of the people didn't really want to sit there and watch a fuzzy screen.
I think the one time I watched a movie with glasses was like Iron Man 3 in Turkey. Um, and like the people we were with really wanted to see it in 3D. And I'm like, I was
Fine.
not. Oh yeah, I was like, fine. I was not pro 3D just because it was basically a giant scam because they just tacked on like $15 on top of the ticket price already. Um, and so it was just so poorly executed in Iron Man 3 that then the people were like, okay, well that sucked. And like I don't think I ever saw a 3D movie again. Um, but it was like I had a VR headset for a while, and then there were games that were made in VR, and then they tried to just do the same thing with games and like upscale them. And if it wasn't built for VR, there's ways you can map it, like Fallout 4, for example. And it's like some of the stuff worked, but there were the times where it would like break the immersion, and it's like, okay, I know I'm in VR and the controller is like getting in the way. It's not as intuitive as I want it to be. But with the 3D movies, there was no point when I was like, where was I? At no point was I ever feeling immersed in the world as if the 3D element enhanced it anymore. And if anything, it like distracted from the normal immersion that takes place when you're watching a good movie. And it's like,
I think you're onto something. The problem that I always had with a lot of those kinds of with 3D movies was it felt like I was at a roller coaster, but I couldn't move my head,
yeah,
and it's just kind
yeah,
of like it's great. It's another roller coaster, and I can't really do cinema veritas stylized movies because they just move so much they make me nauseous. But there was one variation in the theme called Hardcore Henry, which
mm-hmm.
was
I
like
remember that.
it
Yeah.
was kind of the same thing. It wasn't. I didn't see it in 3D. I probably would have. Oh man, I probably would have puked if I'd tried that.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember feeling like, well, this is just like being on rails, and I can move my head, but I'm not moving my head. Somebody else is moving my head for me. So this is even more surreal because like the sounds didn't match the motions that my head was. Well, my virtualized head was making. And so I think for the three-dimensional movie environment to actually make sense, almost it has to exist almost entirely in the virtual environment so that the viewer is the camera and they can just turn their head whenever. It has to be filmed, or maybe it
Yeah.
has to be filmed with a dual three, or what are they called, those spherical camera arrays that have like 12 cameras to get all views at once, and they do like cancellation or something to get the hands and the pole out of the way. Anyways, something like that, like a diversity well, camera, ubiquitous camera orb system, something that could capture 3D, and or maybe they only need one camera orb. I don't know.
So that's like the idea that one would go about it, except for the fact that
Maybe suspend
movies
it from
are
like a drone or something.
no, here's the problem with that. There is a fundamental problem in that movies are literally about what is being framed and captured in the frame. And it's like there is an artistic choice for the director to cut out what's not in the frame, and whether it's a set or whether it's like in situ in like a real life setting, they've cut things out, and you're only seeing what the director and the cinematographer have chosen, and giving people the capacity to move their head, it actually makes it something that's not that. And so that's where in taking the rails off and making it sort of like the place between an open world and something that's recorded, it becomes an experience, but it's not a film.
Yeah.
And so that's where it's like
Well, I mean,
they have experiences,
at
but
that
the
point,
issue is
it'd be like Mist, except you only have to hit the mouse once,
right. And but the issue is,
but
and
you
the
can look
problem with
around.
that, that's this is the problem. Once you start to get to look around, you want to start to interact. And so it's like there's this gap where you think looking around and interacting or not interacting with the story, but being given a story is like uh um it would be like the cross between a movie and virtual world, but that's like the worst possible place to be because all you can do is look around and not interact with things. And that's the difference between like a telltale story where you can at least direct the storyline versus like a movie where you have no influence over when you go sit
Oh
down
no, oh
and
no!
watch and start the
You
movie.
just made
There's
me
no
realize that there already is a variation that explores this. It's called Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, and it's about two minor characters in Hamlet who just focuses on them. They don't really do anything. They do what they're supposed to do in the story of Hamlet, but otherwise, it's like a story about nothing. They're just in the background. They're not interesting. And the story, it's a dark comedy, but there's no, you're right, there's no real story on the sidelines or in the background that's not going to get explored through the framing of the story itself. And so really it's
like once
that just all it does is
you
satisfy
frame
some
it,
weird.
that's the point of
Yeah.
like that's the difference between a story or a film versus
And
the person who's just walking around experiencing things, and which is just an experience, and it's not framed from beginning to end with an arc. Even if the arc is nothing happening, that's still there's like an a structure to it, which is like, that's the Seinfeld Curb Your Enthusiasm, like making a story out of nothing is it became a trope. Obviously, they didn't start it, but it's like even when nothing happens, it's still structured when there is a story or a framing on it, which again, it's like that's the difference between that versus just being in a virtual world and like walking around, even if there's NPCs or things happening. Even okay, let's say somebody's on GTA 5 online and they're just walking around and like not doing any missions but observing real people doing shit online. That's still not a story.
No,
And
it's
so
not.
that's there's this fundamental need of a frame and a structure in which a story happens, that it's not a story is not something that happens on its own. It only happens when somebody structures it. And
I
it's the
think
same thing with the film.
I think for a lot of stories, we also need the fourth wall to protect us from the story itself. Because I wouldn't want to walk around on like the Nostromo. I wouldn't want to walk around like with some xenomorph just hanging out in the room. Even if I'm not like in the store, if I'm just there, that's like still a terrifying environment. No one's prepared for any of that kind of stuff, really. I think that's why horror movies exist. But
Well, and on that note, I've seen the crew member or like the people who were building the sets for the Star Trek TV shows talking about walking through the sets and then being having these moments where they're like their brain doesn't know where it's at and it like thinks that it's on the bridge or think that it's on the fucking Enterprise, and then something breaks that immersion, but then they realize that they had that moment where they were like the magic was real enough that they felt it. So I think there's an element of we think we want to cross that barrier for certain things. Like it would be really cool to be on the Enterprise or like live on the Enterprise. But like you're saying, you don't want to be on the Enterprise when the fucking Romulans show up and it's like in the neutral zone and we don't know if they're fucking friendly or not. Like, you don't want to actually be in, nobody wants to be in that situation. Not even the fucking people on Enterprise. They're
They
like
don't even want to be in that
fucking
situation.
science vessel, basically. They're like looking for scientific shit. They're not trying to be in a fucking shootout with some goddamn Klingons or Romulans. It's the most action-packed episodes, but even the crew doesn't want to be there. So that's where, again, like, I there is the reality of the immersion in, like, okay, the Blade Runner world. Nobody
Oh
wants to
man.
live in a fucking cyberpunk actual
No, yeah,
society. That shit
seriously.
sucks. But the way that the story is framed, it tells the story so well that it makes you feel like you want to be enthralled by that world. But people often confuse that with, like, oh, Disney should like build a fucking Blade Runner world at the park, and now you can go see some replicants and fucking you can pretend to be Decker and you can like hunt the replicants in the crowd. It's like, no, 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 wait, you got the wrong message from what was happening with film immersion. And I think that's where, like, video games gave a, I don't know if you played any MCU games, but it gave a really good opportunity to sort of bridge that fourth wall. And I don't know if there's like Universal Studios has those like live stunt shows. And as a kid, I didn't quite appreciate them. Like, I thought it was cool, but I didn't quite appreciate it as much for what was happening, because in my mind, it's like, oh, if it's the Indiana Jones stunt show, it's like, oh, is that Harrison Ford? No. Oh, okay. It's not real Indiana Jones. So it's like,
There's a sub park.
obviously Indiana Jones isn't real, but as a kid, it like, sorry, go ahead.
There's a sub park of it's called Motion Gate, which is a theme park in Dubai, but the sub park is called World of the Hunger Games.
Oh, I saw that ad and it's like,
Oh, man.
what the fuck, man? They
I,
got all the wrong messages.
every single one of them is wrong. Like, has to
Oh
be
my
the most
god.
tone deaf decision imaginable. It's like, yeah, let's make a world that romanticizes this dystopia.
Well, because then there's some good attempts. Like, they have it's like a Doctor Strange themed VR experience. Like, I haven't done it, but I've seen what it's supposed to be. Like, I don't know how much of it was post edit and how much of it was like, I mean, on the original commercial, I know a lot of it was post editing, but I I imagine they do a good job of mixed reality experience, but it's like, how much is it going to be worth how much whatever they charge? Probably not. And so that's where it's like, these things become so cost prohibitive that if you can only do it once, people may have a bad association of that specific thing because it costs like $6,000 or $7,000 per person or whatever it is. And then you're like, okay, it was cool, but it wasn't $7,000 a person cool. And it's like, like that Star Wars experience that shut down, it was cool, but it wasn't cool enough for whatever it cost. Like, I think they kind of hid the cost, like, in a way. It wasn't super obvious how much it cost because it cost so much that when you're about to actually do it, they're like, okay, now we got you and your family's like thinking that you're going to go. Now we're going to drop the price on you. And then you got to rethink your fucking life choices before you pay for it. And then it's like, yeah, not enough people were that into Star Wars to do that shit. So it shut down. So I I struggle with these things being represented in capitalism that's only trying to exploit them for money, where I'm like, these media could definitely be something cool, but I think that's also why we couldn't use the same terminology when we're trying to like build out these new things. It's like we don't actually want to make a film that we can touch. Like we want to make something else. Like it's closer to a game, but it's not a game. It's like closer to a simulation, but it's not open ended. There's different words for these things that the level of active versus passive involvement, I think we're very limited by books and film and to the degree even video games in that um some things don't need to be video games. It's like there's a certain level of like a rail that the Telltale games have that you can't just start a fight with a random NPC whereas like Grand Theft Auto, that rail doesn't exist. Or other games, you can just start fights with sometimes the rail will be like, oh, you can't kill children or something like, but the rail is not, you have to search very hard to find it. So it's like, um I think it's like one of the Fallout games or something where you can kill basically everybody, but if you try to kill a kid, at that point it doesn't let you, but then all of the characters in the game will start to hate you. It doesn't matter what you've done, everybody will hate you and you won't be able to finish the game. But it's like I only learned about that in a discussion in terms of like someone was doing like a how evil can you get run, and it's like they learned all of these ways that the game basically locks up if you it'll will allow you to do things because the options there, but then it won't allow you to continue and finish the game if you do those things, as if like it's tempting people who would do those things to do them, but punishing them instead of like not punishing, because you don't necessarily have to reward them. But when you don't punish somebody, like in Grand Theft Auto, when you could basically like go to a prostitute and then steal your money back from the prostitute without any sort of repercussion, like that sort of aspect of a game, it in the wrong hands, it can cause some worse behavior in real life. Whereas like somebody who's not a sociopath, it's not gonna necessarily make that person a worse person in real life. And so I think that's where like some of these games like Mortal Kombat, I struggle with Mortal Kombat in that if the people making the game have to fucking go to therapy for making the game, I'm like, dog, I don't know if I should be playing this.
I mean, I don't I don't play Mortal Kombat anymore. It's just it was always a little too much. It was fun when it was just Mortal Kombat at an arcade and you had to pump quarters into the machine and the machine was whooping your ass. And it was like really hard, but all the secrets to the universe are unlocked with that kind of gaming environment at this point. Um I was just thinking about GTA. Like I've never like I think I sent one of my tunes to the strip club because it was one of the missions, and then that was it. And then I don't think I've ever thought to like, you know, the few times I've gone on like murdering sprees, it's pretty much like speed through the neighborhoods till the police show up and then start blowing them up. Want to become like get like all the stars become like what's that word? There's a word that pops up in the screen. It's like when you're like you're at the ultimate bounty or something like that. I don't know, but it never occurred to me. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna go look for the women and children that are walking around in the street in this game. The NPCs that are absolutely not involved in anything, like 100% not involved in anything. It never occurred to me like, yeah, let's do that. I think the things that I always thought were the most fun was jumping out of airplanes and yeah, I was always jumping out of airplanes. That was the most fun for me. For a while, it was finding the ramps and seeing how far I could get the car to go. My my law breaking in GTA is really kind of benign. I mean, I steal in that game. I steal cars because I don't really. I'm not trying. I guess I just don't play the game. I steal cars and I launch them off of ramps. I go and steal a helicopter and jump out of it. Land in a military base, get shot up.
Yeah, and it's like I think what you're describing is basically my same experience with the game in terms of
I would get a motorcycle or dirt bike and drive to the or ride it to the tallest peak in the game, and then ride it down the hill as fast as I could and try not to die.
right. I mean, and it's like you can't do those things in real life, or you can't go sneak onto a fucking helipad, steal a helicopter,
Oh God!
jump out of it, swim back, steal a plane, jump out,
Steal a
swim
boat.
back. Right. All of these things where you're like, the absurdity of it makes one in the moment aware that it's a game, but because it's they're chasing hyper realism, the brain is in this weird uncanny valley of not knowing how much of it is like real because we're controlling it. So there's this element of our heart our heart rate responds to what is happening in these games. And it's like our emotions respond to what's happening in these games. And our dreams respond to what's happening in these games. So there's all these things that these games, all these ways that these games are affecting us that is not the video games make people kill that they were trying to say in the 90s. But there's a reason that the military uses virtual training grounds. Like there's working on hand-eye coordination in a virtual world enhances hand-eye coordination in the real world. So it's like all of these things that we do in these virtual worlds affect how we interact with the real world, whether we like it or not, but not in extreme ways that are un uncontrollable when recognized as being effects from being in a virtual world. Like the same way you're saying, like, yeah, you can get, if you use a virtual reality headset for too long, it'll make you sick. Then you just take the headset off. But then if you fucking don't take the headset off, you're gonna throw up. So there's a line where we can pull ourselves out of the space if it's becoming too much for our bodies to, or whatever, our minds or our emotions to handle. Like this, okay, if you're playing Resident Evil at like 2 o'clock in the morning by yourself in the dark, there's gonna be a point where a jump scare is gonna be like, okay, it's too much. I gotta fucking turn it off. Cause I've been there where it's like you you want to put yourself in that spot to like make it the most possible, but when the game catches you off guard at a certain point, you just gotta like turn the machine off because you're like, nope, too much. That's too
Yeah.
much.
I think it
And
was
it's
Silent
like,
Hill 2 or 3 that I stopped halfway through and just turned the PlayStation off.
might have been two, man, because the same shit happened with me on two, where you're
Yeah.
like, there's a point where you're in the closet and some shit starts going down, and it's like, nope, nope,
Yeah.
nope,
I
nope, nope,
I just
nope.
stopped. I stopped. I turned it off. I changed the TV to like, a different input and turned the lights on. Started doing something else.
Well, because Silent Hill was one of those things where like the first one was it was scary, but two, it just like took it to this. It's not even scary. It's just this weird place where you're like, I don't want to be here. Nope, get me out of this place. And so there's only been a few times where I've felt that from media, and it's like Silent Hill is one of them. Silent Hill 2, I mean. And I never revisited that series after.
Yeah, I watched. I think I
Um,
watched parts of. They made a movie. I think.
they did, and I watched it just to see like because it wasn't.
I didn't watch the
I
whole.
think
I
it was
skipped
like
through it. It didn't make any. It was incoherent first.
yeah. I wanted to see like what they were possibly gonna do with that, and in a way, it was like, oh, you can't duplicate that experience because part of it is like being the protagonist in this video game and then getting to this point where part of the story is you being in the closet while this fucking monster is like roaming through the house and you have to wait for the segment of the game to play out, and it's like no, no, because you just can't really duplicate that shit in a movie because it was like it's hours of building up to that point, not like 90 minutes, not like 100 minutes.
Well,
It
I
was
think
like
it's the
5 or 6 hours.
it's the curse of M. Night Shyamalan. Like you can only watch one of his movies once, and
Mm.
then you've seen the gimmick, and then you can't unsee it. You can't watch the movie again with fresh eyes. That's it.
I think that's a sign that his movies aren't as good as they they were when they came out. Like some of this stuff, okay. Um, I'm trying to think of a movie that has a twist that's like rewatchable. I mean, I guess like to a degree, Doctor Strange has a twist at the in the post credits. Oh, I don't know if that's and so it's like really hard to find a movie that's I guess memorable that has a twist that's also rewatchable. But I think in framing it that way, I think the issue might be when someone's working on something that's a twist, they may focus on the twist so much that like the whole film or story or whatever it is gets spent setting up the twist. So then it's like that's all you it's the big payoff, but that's all you remember from the thing is the twist. Like the journey was not memorable. And I guess after thinking for a while, I don't know if you've seen any of the Sherlock BBC show episodes,
No.
but there's a lot of twists in those episodes, but there's so much that happens in the episodes that when the twists happen, you don't really hyper focus on it because the rest of the story was good. So it was like, oh,
Usual
they
Suspects.
got me. I mean, but and then even once you know it, you'll still go back and watch it
Yeah, Usual
because
Suspects. I've been trying to think of a movie that has a twist
oh
that I can
yeah,
rewatch.
okay, that's a good one.
That's
Yeah,
like
that's
that's
good.
that
It took a
dude.
while.
That took me like 10 minutes to come up with.
Yeah. But that's a good example where yeah, the movie's good, and so the twist, you remember the twist, but the movie's so good that it's almost like, oh, the twist is there. Oh, I guess the same shit with Ocean's 11 because it's like I almost forgot that there was a twist in Ocean's 11. I mean, that's the big thing, but it's like the movie's so good that it's like, oh yeah, there is a twist at the end that you kind of don't see coming because they set it up so well. Um, that it's like, you know, again, I think that's part of why M. Night Shyamalan was like people would always hate on him for being overrated. And I think he was technically overrated, but I think he's come to properly be rated in that people saw his gimmick, and then when he didn't employ the gimmick, it just was like a mediocre story. And not terrible, just not good. So it's like, yeah, I think his reputation is it fell exactly where it needed to be in the end. Um, and there was a period, like I said, where he was overrated. So yeah,
I'm curious. What was his most recent stuff? Cato Lake, 2024. Trap. I don't know what that is. The Watchers. Servant. Knock at the cat. He's been busy.
mm-hmm.
He makes movies all the
I think
time.
his daughter started making movies or something too.
It looks like he makes a movie almost every year. Oh, he's had a few breaks. I really I think. Oh, I guess no, I was wrong. I thought the last movie of his that I saw was The Last Airbender, but it turns out the last movie of his that I saw was Devil, which all takes place on like an elevator, and it's pretty terrible. I'm serious. It's like a one room. It the okay. So Bokeem Woodbine's in it, and like he's one of my favorite actors. Like I can pretty much enjoy anything that he's in, and he's great. But him being his normal awesome self isn't enough to save a terrible movie that takes place entirely in an elevator.
I recently learned he was in a punk band at one point.
That doesn't surprise me at all. I bet it was awesome.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but then, yeah, there's these times where you hope somebody can save. One person can't save
No.
a failed production. If that was the case, the Rock's movies would be like successful more than they are. But
I mean, there's only so many. How many different ways can we see him experience some kind of near cataclysmic event that would normally just destroy a human being, but somehow he manages to surf it out on like a the door to a to a closet, or he manages to find the one working truck in the I guess it's too much to ask for a roller coaster movie to have like any kind of plausibility.
Well, and
So also I gotta totally retract my initial analysis of the new MacGyver series. I started watching it again and I was completely off. He does not use guns. He's like very vocal about it. And the
okay.
only dilemma with that show that I have is that like there are still too many gunfights and way too much hand to hand combat and not enough complex problem solving with random stuff that's on hand.
Mm.
But yeah, the spirit of the show is retained for the most part. And on a completely different note, lately my thing has been making giant ice cubes, like a 6 inch by 6 inch by 4 inch ice cube, and then I put it in a plastic bag and beat on it with a spoon until it turns into big irregular ice chunks. I'm not sure why I got into doing this, but it's been one of the most fulfilling kind of like pouring a beverage over pouring my soda. Actually, I really need to get some like orange juice for this or some lemonade, but just like pouring a soda over it and watching these things, they'll just kind of melt and become crystal clear. It's it's breathtaking. I highly recommend it. And of course, finding a suitable container to freeze a volume of like it's like 4 cups of water. It's not that's a lot. It turns into more ice after I break it up than I use or than the container that I use to form it can contain. I feel like it's way better. It's a way better value proposition than the old school ice tray. And they don't have that,
Yeah.
and it doesn't have the weird, funky flavor of ice machines that never get
Well, and
cleaned.
the ice trays end up tasting weird after a while,
Yeah,
or like making the ice taste weird.
I have to like
Uh,
rinse this thing out of the container to get it out. It's like it's a big block of ice. I mean, I'm not. It's not like it's a brick. It's not. It's the kind of thing that if I dropped it on the floor and it shattered, I'd be really sorry because it would take forever to clean up. But I highly recommend this. This is like one of the most bizarre. I look forward to pulling the big ice cube out, bagging it, and like wrecking the thing with a heavy tablespoon. It's a very worthwhile experience. To any of the two people who are listening right now.
well, I was thinking about it. It reminds me of like kneading dough, where that shit. I think there's something to creating positive feedback loops with your hands of like small rewards where you've like made something and there's like a visible outcome where it's like, yeah, making your block of ice, it's the most rudimentary thing you could make with your hands, but you still made it out of like effectively you took water and made something more useful. And it's like I think even in that small, it's like above the caveman brain in that there's this need to innovate that makes us, I think, like want to take things and then break them apart and then put them back together. And it's just something visceral to them literally just being able to like take the thing that you made and break it apart and then make it useful in your drink. And so it seems like a very um pedantic breakdown of that process, but like I've been doing stuff with my hands, and then I like lost feeling in my thumb, and then it made me think about like how much of operating depends on actually being able to like get haptic feedback. And so that's where again I'm like, I think a lot of the human experience is creating these haptic feedback loops of like, I think the more often we take those like opportunities for creation, then it starts to extend even to shit like ice. Like now you're, who knows how long till you're doing like ice sculptures and shit. And then like taking a little, you know, 6x6 block of ice and then turning it into a fucking like whatever, a penguin, and then putting a penguin in your drink in like a minute. You know what I mean? And not to say that you should start doing that, but I think there's, I think what we've seen in this generation of what has been called influencers as like a lump term is like a bunch of different types of creativity that have also happened to be captured on video. And now we see them like, one different type of the creativity is the capture and the presentation itself, but a lot of the different creative aspects are being included in just like, oh, this is influencer culture, but it's like, I bet if you went and searched,
Oh man,
there's
so
like a whole
I know
ice
how this I
culture.
know how this works. I need to get a little camera and get some footage of me filling up my ice block tray, and then footage of me putting it in the fridge. You know, I'll write a name on a label or something, so that, or a date on a label, so it's like, you know, people will know. And each video will culminate with me pulling a block of ice out and smashing it with a big metal spoon, and that's it. It's like a 3 minute long video after it's edited down. Make one of those a week. Smashing blocks of ice with TN. Let's do this.
Yeah, man.
I think it'll work. I see a lot of like absolute crap on YouTube, and it makes me wonder. It's like, what kind of? There are obviously no standards. Obviously anyone can make anything they want.
I mean, I've seen these videos where people just take blocks of soap and cut them up into like
Smaller blocks of
fine.
soap.
I mean, it's like technically, yeah, smaller blocks, but they do these fine cross sections and then just like peel off the layers. And that's just the entire video. Is somebody cutting up fucking soap and peel it and like fucking, and this shit gets like millions of views though. So it's like, so it's like, man, yeah, it's fucking. I guess it's stupid. I don't know, but millions of people watch that shit. So, and that's you know, obviously there's the self-destructive side of YouTube that does all kinds of self-destructive shit to like get views. But yeah, some people are just literally cutting up soap and just other people are just enjoying watching other people cut up soap. I I
You know,
I I think that's awesome, and I'm fascinated by that. And I wish it didn't come with all of the negative stuff. But there's something very like wholesome about that I think boomers don't don't like. They hate it.
I need to get like an outdoor weatherproof microphone and then run it on in one of the side channels, and then we can just turn all of these into ASMR videos. 'Cause every time I see some ASMR video recommendation, it's got like hundreds of thousands of views, and it's like sounds of a tree. Wind is blowing. There's a bird, maybe. Maybe. It's always been really impressive. Like, or I've always been really impressed by like the diversity of ideas that people have managed to share with computers. Like, literally everything, any idea that's ever existed can be found on the internet today. Like right now. This is not like an ad for like Brilliant or whatever, one of those things. I'm actually serious. There's like, we live in this really impressive time where like the sum total of all ideas and knowledge exists within a few search terms, and for whatever reason we're being conned, collectively being conned into taking, you know, what should be a simple query and investing 100 times the electrical resources and computing resources to generate a slightly more digestible answer. It's like, despite having access to every idea and all of the sum total of all humans and human knowledge, it, it doesn't like make people smart enough to recognize that we don't need three-dimensional Google when two-dimensional Google does just fine for like 99% of everyone.
So, okay. I was I think we've discussed before that there's like less than a million movies that exist, which I don't know if it sounds like a lot or not a lot, but it's basically around 9,000 films get made every year worldwide. And so that's where I'm like, so much content gets produced that like 625 days worth of films get made every year. Because then this is where it's important to articulate, like, the reason we're articulating between films is because people just recording their fucking shit on an iPhone is not a film. But there's so much of that that when you take into account the content that's not film, that's not television, that's just people recording stuff, and it's not even produced necessarily, then there's just so much content being made. At a point we're gonna like overload shit. Our We're making too many videos
Videos that nobody actually wants to watch,
that nobody actually wants to watch.
pictures that no one's ever going to
Videos,
share with anybody.
if shit ever breaks, it's gonna be like the 10,000, like 10 trillion billion whatever video up, somebody uploading some shit where they're sitting in their car eating some shit and trying to do a review of some food, and then the internet's gonna go down, and it was that last video. That's where I'm like, it's gonna be something completely benign, like fucking videos.
In a billion years, alien archaeologists will come to Earth and they'll find like a cell phone that somehow like survived. It's encased in some like maple syrup or something like that, and so they put it on their computer and they manage to extract the data, and it's a bunch of pictures of feet at in front of pools and bodies of water, and it has videos of food. That's it. That's what's gonna survive. We're gonna have like you know, a wealth of images of feet and food and videos of people smiling. That's actually not that bad. Actually, when I think about it, that's actually a pretty good outcome if that actually plays out like that.
Dog, this doesn't. These numbers don't even make sense. Over 500 hours of video were uploaded to YouTube every minute, which means 30,000 hours per hour. Oh my God, this doesn't make any fucking sense. This roughly amounts to 82 years worth of content uploaded every day. Oh God.
Okay,
Oh
okay.
God, that's so much useless content.
I have changed my mind. Anything that's uploaded to YouTube should absolutely be consumed by Gemini. They should give it to Rufus, give it to Apple Intelligence, just give it away because no one's gonna make anything useful with it. None of this stuff it's all just advertising. It's all just marketing for some product. Almost all of it's marketing for some product. Some of it's actually some hobbyist doing their hobby thing, but I don't get to see those videos. I know I've been told they exist.
I can feel my brain growing from thinking about these numbers. It's like doing calculations that it didn't know a brain could do. Every second, 6 hours of video are uploaded to YouTube. What?
Oh my God.
What? What kind of exponential? What?
There needs to be some kind of additional button that when people try to upload their crap, it says, "Are you sure you really need to upload this?"
Yes.
Please, no. Before you upload this, select 10 people to share it with right now, and those all 10 of those people have to hit the accept button. Otherwise, it won't get shared or accepted. That's the way it should work out.
I think you just created something. Yes.
Internet, you can fucking have that shit. I'm serious. If people want to share their crap, they're welcome to, but they have to have like enough people. Consensus. Let's say it only requires 5 people to have consensus, and they have to send it to 10. Maybe you only have to send it to 8, but still they have to get 5 out of 8. And if those 5 people are like, yeah, let's go, then it gets shared. But if not, sorry about you, but nobody wants to watch your movie.
Mm.